I was born in Oregon, 1945. The war on both fronts, both in Europe and the Asia-Pacific theater, had not finished yet. When it did finish, and primarily the island hopping Marines came back, and I was old enough to comprehend what they did, I was regaled with stories of what the Marines did. So I knew my life's destiny was to be in the military. I remember when I was still very, very young, my father one time, I was maybe 5 years old, took me to work with him and told me one day that when my nation called, I was to serve my nation in the military if I were good enough, and that there'd be no hesitation to do that. I never forgot those words. I can still remember the day we were at a lookout tower in Oregon on the Coast Range looking out to the Pacific Ocean, and I never forgot his words. And I just prayed, as a child could pray, that I'd be good enough and fortunate enough, and I was able to join the military. I had no doubt what my DNA stamped in me was to be, and that was a warrior for the United States. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that. I think my father raised me to be a Marine, but when we moved to Ketchikan, Alaska, the only thing we had there was Civil Air Patrol. And I immediately delved into Civil CAP and enjoyed it so much, enjoyed the Air Force. Went to 3 encampments, summer encampments at Elmendorf Air Force Base, and was very appreciative of what I learned. Learned well and succeeded at those encampments. And when I became a cadet captain in 1963, with the Vietnam War starting up, I knew there'd be no doubt that it'd be Air Force. And so in '66, when I joined the Air Force, it was destined to be Air Force, I should say. Air Force was a natural fit, and Air Force has been my life. It still is. It's just, I miss it terribly.
It's May 1980. A very special American airman returns to the Philippines and to old friends.
This is great. I've never had such a welcoming like this. It's so fantastic. I don't think I saw Amelia after we took you to San Fernando, to the hospital.
It seems all too easy in this society nowadays to just sort of neglect one's neighbor or one's fellow man and just sort of ignore him. And that's where a person has to strive to make himself aware of other people's plights and try to use what means you have at your disposal to help other people.
Guys, fantastic. I knew I had a good investment. Super.
Helping other people, that others may live. It's the motto of the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service, and a way of life for Master Sergeant Wayne Fisk through 5 tours in Southeast Asia and 2 Silver Stars earned during the Son Tay POW rescue mission and the Mayaguez raid.
It's sort of like a saying which we had in Southeast Asia that circulated in rescue circles that for those who fought for it, life has a flavor the protected will never know. And we know the quality of life, we know the flavor of life. And that's what keeps rescue people going. That's what makes them get in and fight and go to the furthest demands of human endurance in order to save somebody, in order to bring them out.
I did see a movie in 1962 on my little island, Ketchikan, Alaska. There was a movie that came to the theater one night. It was called Flight from a Shia, and it had Yul Brynner in it. And I saw this movie, and it was wild and crazy guys who risked their lives to save other people's lives. And it was fantastic. I liked Yul Brynner anyway. But in this movie, Yul Brynner was the guy jumping out of aircraft and doing these wild things. And he got good-looking girls. And I thought, my gosh, wouldn't that be interesting to have a job like that? So when I joined the Air Force, enlisted in the Air Force, and went to basic training, all I wanted to do was go to Vietnam and perhaps be chosen to be a tail gunner on a B-52 and get some whacks there at the enemy that way. Misconception all the way of what the B-52 tail gunners did. But my TI told me about pararescue. He said, hey, Fisk, you ought to become a PJ. Now, PJs to me were pajamas. And he thinks my AFSC is going to be in the form of a pajama for somebody else. And he could see that I misinterpreted what he was saying. And so Then he explained pararescue, and I correlated that immediately to Flight from Mashiach with Yul Brenner, and boom, that was exactly it. So when I had the opportunity to interview for pararescue at career counseling, man, it was an immediate go to it. And there I couldn't sign up fast enough. The recruiter was magnificent, ribbons all the way up over his chest and everything. And he really cinched the sales pitch. He said, Fisk, we're going to send you to do all these different jobs, and we'll send you all these TDY places and things like that. And then if you're good enough and you do become a PJ, we're going to give you a bright, new, shiny diving watch just like this one. Man, sign me up immediately. Signed up, and something like 18 months later, was a qualified pararescueman.
So you went through the pipeline?
Had a pipeline. It was very ragged in those days, nothing like what we have today, our fine warriors having today. And it was a very short pipeline, nothing as articulated as what it is today. Our men are trained to the very nth degree. They are magnificent. So we've done very well in training our warriors of today. I said 18 months. It was really 18 months to go to Vietnam. I think our total pipeline was much shorter than that. And then we had aerial gunnery and everything, aircrew operations. And then 18 months, we were ready to go to Vietnam. But it was exciting. The first tour in Southeast Asia was flying operations out of Udon, Thailand. And we had to wait. I'm a plank owner of the 40th ARRS, and we formed up the 40th Air Rescue in 1967. Didn't get our aircraft over there until a few months later after we arrived there in August of 67. And so we flew with the H-3s. And it was, I loved the 53s. And so it wasn't until the first couple months of 68 that I finally got a real good combat mission. And the first combat mission was an eye-opener. We went into North Vietnam, had a good shoot 'em up, lost my cherry, no longer was a virgin. And that was an eye-opener, which was fun. And it resolved my thinking, and as though there was never any doubt that this was my chosen path. I felt comfortable with it. And then signed on for 4 more tours, a total of 4 years and 8 months in Vietnam, or Southeast Asia. 1 tour at Da Nang, and then the remaining tours returned to the 40th Air Rescue in Udon. Participated in the Son Tay rescue operation, which was a very fast-moving operation, one night, and then had multiple combat rescues, some successful, some not. Those which were not, we merely came back, cleaned up, prepared the birds for the next mission, if it were to be the next hour or the next day, and didn't bemoan not getting the guy so much as what did we learn from it by not being able to get in there. It was often a matter of chance where the individual or individuals went down. Enemy opposition, time of day, for example, how far in bad guy country he was at. And so it was not one of these things where one became remorseful about not getting rescued and bringing home the guy. When we did bring home the guy, oh my gosh, it was magnificent. We would have a base-wide celebration, and it affected not only him as well as his flying mates, but obviously his family, and it was a widespread, you bring home a guy, it's like tossing a stone in a pond, and the ripple effect was magnificent as it went out. So rescuing a person was a very fulfilling feeling, and indeed I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to be in rescue. I was in theater already for the raid when the raid was being formulated. Once it was formulated at the presidential, the State Department, or the DOD level, and the guys went into training, I was in theater at the 40th Air Rescue. And so I knew nothing about what was going on. However, 4 of us, PJs, were chosen to participate on the raid. They wanted the four of us to fill slots on the attack aircraft, and we four were chosen to fill those slots because we knew the area, the operational and tactical arena over there. And so we were chosen by our team chief, and his criteria was young, single guys, no baggage, either there in Thailand or back in the States, and our combat rescue, our combat record as he knew it. He brought us in one morning and sat us down. The setting was a little bit different than I had ever seen around the squadron area. We had security police securing our squadron buildings. And I thought that was strange. I had to actually show ID and identify myself. And went in, and the team chief had the four of us sat down at a long table. It's an oblong table. He was at the head of the table, and then two guys over here, myself, and another guy over here. And he told us that it was a top secret mission if we wanted to volunteer for it. Yes or no. If not, then remove ourselves. Well, yes, top secret, hairy missions, sounds good. Okay, make our day. So we all volunteered, and he said less than 50% of you are going to come back. My rationale at that time was, well, okay, these two guys are not coming back, and probably this guy over here is not coming back because I'm coming back. So I felt very secure in that. I felt very bad for these two guys over here and for Randy over here, but I was. And then Pappy, the team chief, could not tell us where it was. He didn't even know where it was, only that it was very highly classified and high risk. We then went into isolation, and 2 or 3, we went to another location in Thailand, which was Tok Lee Air Force Base down south towards Bangkok. And 2 days later, the rest of the force came from the United States. Still didn't know where it was at. It was all very, very sensitive. We were in a secure compound, highly guarded, highly monitored of what we said, what we did. And when this arriving force, my old team chief from Vietnam itself, came, and I said, "Where are we going?" And we couldn't ask that question because our rooms were monitored, but I mouthed it, "Where the heck are we going?" And he just smiled at me. And we were still in bed when they arrived at 02 in the morning. And he flattened out my pillow. He made a small circle like this, and then another ring around that small circle, and then an even larger ring. Now, what did he draw? Well, he drew a target, and then he stabbed his finger right in the middle of that target, which signified bullseye. And bullseye was the code name for Hanoi. Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. Hanoi. Nobody goes to Hanoi except crazy magnificent fighter pilots who go in there to do their job dropping bombs and bullets on those people up there. And then, of course, Jolly Greens who go in after those fighter pilots if they get themselves shot down. Only crazy people go to Hanoi. Okay, sounds good. Let's go to Hanoi. Because he then wrote in the air, P-O-W. Oh, magnificent. We knew what the POWs were suffering up there in those prison cells of starvation, deprivation, beatings, dying in those cells. And to be a part of a POW rescue force, it was magnificent. And so everything went out the window. There is no thought other than the POWs. There is no other thought when one is talking about rescue, air rescue, combat search and rescue, than the objective, the goal of getting that person's life. One's life in air rescue is forfeited, all for that, the goal of that survivor out there. And to go to Hanoi, my gosh, piece of cake. We can go in there. We can go straight to bullseye and get our POWs. It was a magnificent moment. It was a magnificent mission. The only bad part about it was that the ultimate mission, the primary mission, failed. It did have ancillary consequences in which the POWs and the ancillary camps around Hanoi were closed down. All POWs were put into the Hanoi Hilton, and the bad guys couldn't do what they had typically done, which was tremendous deprivation, torture, things like that on our people. And so the lives of the POWs changed and made it better. To this day, the POWs say that Son Tay was the linchpin, the kingpin that changed their lives up there. To me, it was a failed mission. I'm glad it worked out well for them, but we didn't bring them back. And so it's just another mission. We got back home after picking up one aircraft, two guys. One aircraft did get shot down. They made it back to central Laos. We picked them up, got back to Udorn, cleaned up the birds, got them ready for another mission. And that's the way it is in air rescue. You don't lick your wounds, you don't mourn and things like that. You get ready for the next guys because they're going to depend upon us to be right there for them. But that was a very poignant moment, yes. It needs to be remembered in history as just the extraction of the Marines. I think the Marines could have done very well. It wasn't a rescue per se. I don't appreciate that word, and I don't think I know the Corps does not say we didn't need to be rescued. Those badass Marines were on the beachhead, out of the jungle, but if pressed, those ass-kicking sons of bitches would have gone into the jungle, and they would have kicked ass. So I think we need to say that the Marines weren't rescued, the Marines were extracted, and we need to correct that in Air Force history. The whole mission operation began on 12 May when the Mayaguez was hijacked off the high seas. It was an act of piracy. President Ford was immediately notified about this. I'm sure in his mind, when the bad guys had the Khmer Rouge, Cambodian Khmer Rouge, did this, that he immediately flashed back to 1968 when the North Koreans hijacked the USS Pueblo off of North Korea. And he wasn't going to have the Mayaguez in that kind of a situation. If the Mayaguez and crew had been taken to the Cambodian mainland, I have no doubt that the crew would all have been executed. The Khmer Rouge, who had executed, as we found out later in history, over 1 million of their own people, would have not hesitated in 1975 to execute a few round eyes. They were a vicious, barbaric, animalistic tribe of individuals. They had no rules. They had no laws of land warfare. We knew that. We who had engaged the Khmer Rouge in various times throughout the war in Southeast Asia knew these rotten sons of bitches were bad people. And so we had the fortitude to engage these people. I'm sure President Ford felt the same way. He had good intelligence. He was not going to let the Mayaguez fall into the hands of the Khmer Rouge. He tried very, very hard diplomatically to recover the ship as well as the crew, to no avail. On 13 May, he said, send in the ass kickers. Unfortunately, at that time, we had no organized ass-kicking force. We had the Air Force in Thailand, the Navy floating in various locations throughout the South China Sea, and we had Marines on Okinawa. So we had to make an adjunct force work, an adjunct force that had never trained together, had no operational plan for something like this. Today we have a force like that. It's called SOCOM, and various plans that we can go to a file and pull out which operational plan we wish. But in those days we didn't. And so in a matter of hours, from 13 May, we activated the Marines at Okinawa, the Navy in the South China Sea, and all of the American forces remaining in Thailand. Now, the war in Southeast Asia supposedly ended in 1973. This is May in 1975. So we have limited forces that have never trained together in Thailand, Air Force forces. So we throw this adjunct Air Force together, and then we bring in the Navy, and we bring in the Marines, and what have we got? My gosh, we've got a hodgepodge of potential disaster there, but we're going to make it work in order to recover these folks because they're Americans, and that's what Americans do. So in a matter of hours, we deploy from NKP in northeast Thailand to the southern part of Thailand. The Navy turns its ships around, a few ships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, to concentrate in the southern part of Cambodia. And the Marines are loaded on, brought out of the field where they've been training for days and days, sleep deprivation, food, everything like that. And they put on board aircraft and are being sent to Utapao Air Force Base. We formulate and get together at Utapao on 14 May, have a ad hoc, what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, session, and formulate a rough plan. We do not have good intelligence on the island where we think the Mayaguez crew is being held. But you know, it's kind of one of these things, let's test the water. We're going to press to test and see what happens. That's all we can do. We certainly know that if we don't do something, the bad guys will do something, and the precious lives of these Americans cannot just be predicated upon waiting to see what the bad guys are going to do. So on 15 May, we send out a wave of choppers. They hit the island a few hours after daybreak, and we find out that the bad guys are waiting for us, and they're in much stronger, more intense force than we had anticipated. They pop 3 aircraft out of the sky immediately. Guys are killed, guys are on the beachhead, entrapped by this opposition force, which we find out that is not, as we had thought, 27 lightly armed fishermen, but a hardened Khmer Rouge force of some 100, 200 bad guys. And they're well trenched in with a good fortification of armament. Now our guys are down there. So we send in more Marines to overpower, because we still think our American, or the crew of the Mayaguez is on the island. As we're sending in reinforcements to break the siege that the bad guys have on our Marines, and we thinking that the crew is still there, we find out that the crew is actually in another location, and the crew is being identified, and the crew is being brought back to the Mayaguez, to the ship itself, because where the crew is at, the Mayaguez crew is at, it's getting a little bit of forceful intervention put on it in the form of bombs and bullets. And so the crew is being brought back. Now we have this small little war, this little battle going on over here. And now we've got to disengage our Marines from the bad guys. And the bad guys are putting up a heck of a fight. They're well fortified. This thing was well planned. They knew what they had done, what they wanted. They had actually, in fact, at one time captured a Japanese ship and released it. And I think they had also hijacked an Australian freighter. I believe it was Australian. The Mayaguez, in any event, was the 3rd ship that they had hijacked. So they had well planned this thing, and they had well fortified the island. So they had staged this whole affair. Our guys on the ground are receiving a lot of activity down there. We have fast movers coming in, and these fast movers are in the form of A-7s and F-4 aircraft. It's a hard island to bomb. We don't know where our Marines are at, pinpointedly, and where the bad guys are at, because the jungle canopies cannot distinguish a distinctive line. And so their actions are not that good. Them dropping the bombs and bullets is not that accurate. So Spectre AC-130s, gunships roll in and do a much better job. And in fact, Spectre rules the day because Spectre is close air support, and Spectre is more suited for that. As the day wears on, we're able to eradicate more and more of the bad guys, silence them, and start to extract our Marines. That proceeds on throughout the day. We're pulling more and more Marines out, more and more aircraft get shot up, then back from Gauteng. They make it back into Thailand, where many of them emergency land and are no longer able to function. The aircraft are left there in Thailand and the crew is taken back to Utapao, to the confines of Utapao. We're losing more and more birds. More and more air crews are, since they don't have birds, they're taken out of the action. We're finally down to 3 birds late in the afternoon, and there are still 50 plus Marines on the island in close contact, TIC, troops in contact with the bad guys. And we need to get them out because the sun is going down. As the sun goes down, extractions become more intense. The bad guys are moving in to the Marines. Marines are being forced down across the very narrow beach down towards the water, and urgency is more defined. My bird, Knife 5-1, is the last bird to make the extraction of some 30 Marines under full darkness. And it becomes very intense. We have one other bird, one other helicopter that is up here. It, I think, it is still mission capable, but it is a sick bird. It's been shot up, and it will still stay in our area to cover us if we get shot down, and can somehow, this bird will come in to pick us up. But Knife 5-1, we start to go into the island, and we swing our tail down to where the Marines have been pushed into the water. It's like a horseshoe, and they're in a firing position in a horseshoe. The jungle is off over here, so they're in this firing position. The bad guys are all over inside here, and I look down off the ramp and I can see what looks like Tinkerbell does. I can see the muzzle flashes of the bad guys, and of course what the Marines are firing out towards the bad guys. And so we're lowering our helicopter down into this fire area to extract the Marines. The pilot drifts off a little bit because he has vertigo, because the flares, the Lu-2s, Lu-2 flares are parachuting down. There are Lu-2s that are cooking off underneath in the water. There's no distinct horizon. There is smoke in the air. There is dust. The residue from battle all day is covering the island. And so he starts to get vertigo. We start to go into the trees. I say, break away, break away. And so we go around, and it's a very difficult situation. All of a sudden, boom, we're in the water. My gosh, the pilot says, damn, I thought we were at 500 feet, and we're in the water, and water's coming in. So I guess we better make the decision to apply full power and get the heck out of here. He swings around. Now, this is a first lieutenant who's never been in battle before. The co-pilot is a second lieutenant. And I thought, my gosh, when we started out this morning, I thought, God, you just cursed me by having me on this crew as a first lieutenant pilot and a second lieutenant co-pilot. What have I done to you? But they are performing magnificently up there. These 2 young lieutenants, and now the rest of the crew are cherry also. I'm the only combat veteran on here, but they have been listening to how to do this. So when I say break away and the pilot comes back and we land in the water, then he picks it up and he says, guys, I don't know what to do. The only way I think we can do this is to turn on all the lights, landing lights, the hoist light, everything, which makes us a very perfect target for the bad guys when we come back over here to land, extract the Marines. And I said, the only way we can do this is to turn on all our lights so you don't have this vertical situation. So boom, all of our lights come on. And the other bird up here, Jolly, or Knife, what have you done? This is the only way we can do this. We're coming in with all of our lights. And we know on the crew that this is probably not going to work out well for us, but we have got to do this. So we swing around like this, drop ourselves right down into the firefight, and start extracting these Marines. The Marines are so intense upon delivering fire suppression to the bad guys, and the bad guys, you can see the volume of the muzzle flashes just really open up. And so the Marines are trying to suppress that. I go out the ramp there, and not wanting to go up and grab a Marine and say, come on, let's get our asses out of here, I do the next thing, which is probably as insane. I fire a couple rounds into the air, and this one Marine turns around because he's probably thinking a bad guy is coming, shoot, you know. And I said, come on, let's go. And he taps his buddy, and pretty soon the platoon leader, who was a captain, sees what's happening, and he yells and starts telling the guys to start extracting. And so they do this in a very orderly manner and come into the chopper. Everybody comes in. The bad guys stop firing, which is strange. And then I remember having seen a body on the beach up there. And I said, I wonder if they had extracted that body. I am not going to have a Marine left up here on this island, because this is the last stage out of Dodge, and we're not coming back here. So I get, all the Marines are in. I tell the captain, is everybody in? And he says, yeah. I don't like what he says. He says, yeah. And so I'm off intercom. So I hand motion to the chief enlisted, or the flight engineer, the guy in charge up there. And I told him to hold the aircraft. And so he then tells the pilot the aircraft is going to be held. And this is dicey, because here we are with all the bad guys out there, and all the chopper is fully loaded, and it's a very volatile situation. So I go back out, and I go to where the cantonment area was, and I sift through there, and I can't find the body. It must have been extracted. And as I'm out there, all of a sudden, I start receiving some ground fire from two snipers out there. And so I then return fire, and they're shooting and I'm shooting. We're both the bad guys and me, we're pretty beat up in this day, but I return fire, and I see the chopper over there, and this is not a good situation, because I think I'm being distracted by these snipers, and another force is going to come around here and either satchel charge the chopper or go on board and just shoot everybody. It's not good. While I'm quickly thinking of all these things here, all of a sudden, a red line, it seemed like somebody drew a red pencil line, comes down like this, and it's roaring. I think it was roaring. Maybe it's just my imagination. This line comes down like this, and it sweeps across in front of me. It goes way over like this, a solid red line it seems, and back like this. It came from Spectre, the AC-130 gunship, and this red line presented itself in my mind like an aurora, like a curtain, like the aurora borealis, over and then back. And I knew that everything, and it was very, very close, that everything inside there was totally eradicated, because where Spectre goes, nothing grows. Everything was annihilated. I'm down in the sand, and when I pick myself up, after that, firing stops, and the red line disappears back up into the skies. I brush myself off, and I think of that movie, Stir Crazy, of Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder walking into that movie, into the prison, and they're trying to show their bravado, and they know what's going to happen to them if they don't put on this bravado. And they were saying, yeah, I'm bad, man, I'm bad. And that's exactly the way I felt, walking, dusting myself off there. I'm bad because I got Spectre up topside there. And then I dashed like heck back to the helicopter, because I knew I needed to get out of there. About that time, a green flare comes up out of the jungle. A green flare skyrockets up out of the out of the jungle, and comes over towards our direction, my direction, and the helicopter's direction. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I get over to the chopper, get inside, motion to Riley, the flight engineer, to tell the pilot, Dick Brims, Lieutenant Dick Brims, to get the heck out of here. He starts to yell, and so I'm looking forward like this, and I feel something brush my shoulder, like this, and hit my shoulder. I start to spin around because I'm thinking, oh my God, bad guys inside. So I take my weapon, bring it down, ready to hit these guys. I'm thinking they're coming inside to spray, to shoot. And I immediately reckon, 2 Marines. What the heck, these 2 Marines here? I look down at the captain. He's shocked that these 2 Marines just came in. What the F over? And I look at Riley, hold. And I go back outside. What had happened, that these 2 Marines had been apparently pinned down by these snipers or these 2 gun positions out there. Anyway, if we had left, when the rest of the Marines came on board, these 2 guys would have been left. And I look at them, and they're all smiles. They come in. Hold your position again, Riley. I'm going back outside. I go back out very, very close to the helicopter this time. I'm not going to wander off. That green flare is still in my mind. And I look out there. There is nobody else that I can see. Who has not disengaged these bad guys? We can't wait. We can't wait. So it seems like it's minutes just ticking by, waiting. They're not more than seconds. Time is rushing by. And I'm just thinking, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. All right, let's get the hell out of here. I rush back on board. Go. The ramp is in what we call the float position on the 53. And so I'm standing on the ramp because all these Marines there's no other room. All the room on the board, the floor is full. I'm standing on the ramp. When Lieutenant Brims lifts up the helicopter, the ramp goes down with me on it. And boom, I hit the ramp. And foolish me, I didn't put it in the hold position. The ramp is in float, the ramp goes down. And I remember, boom, I'm sliding off the ramp. Okay, get into the water, let it go down, fall into the water before we get too high, too fast, and swim for it, but get away from that goddamn island. And I thought, give it a try. So I threw my arm back like this, and there was the magnificent feel of hands, boom, 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 like this on my arm. The captain of the Marines grabbed a hold, and as did his gunny sergeant. And they were hanging on for dear life because they're beginning to be drug off. And so the other Marines grab hold of those 2 guys. And we finally get me to a position to where I can get up to the ramp control and grab the ramp control and flip that thing over. We go home that night to an empty flight line at Utapao Air Base. And, we go to the Coral Sea, drop off the Marines, and eventually we get our sick bird back to Utapao. The flight line is empty. Everybody's been beat to hell. The mini choppers are not there. I think there's only 3 or 4 choppers that made it back to Utapao. The flight line essentially deserted. No welcoming crew party for us or anything like that. And essentially that was appropriate, I think, for our actions in Southeast Asia. We simply turned out the lights of military action in Southeast Asia. But we had rescued, and we had the crew of the Mayaguez released. And that was appropriate also, that we left no Americans behind out there. There is the story that 2 or 3 Marines were left behind on the island. If they were in hiding positions on the island, foolish on them for not having come out. I personally think that they were not alive. There's a long story about that, but there's also the saga. The 3 men were left behind alive. They were not where they were supposed to be, and I am very defensive about that. I'm very defensive about the action of Gerald Ford, because President Ford did exactly what a commander should do. And the pros and cons of what happened, mistakes, on the Mayaguez are not his fault. I'm very, very supportive of what President Ford did. But that was the last action, the last battle of the Vietnam War. Glad to have been on it.
On May 12, 1975, the Cambodian Khmer Rouge Navy seized the American container ship SS Mayaguez and its crew in international waters. In response, Air Force Chief of Staff General David C. Jones briefed President Ford and his staff on the situation. The President then acted decisively. The Mayaguez was anchored southwest of the Cambodian coast, and military planners believed the crew was being held on nearby Koh Tang Island. During the night, U.S. Air Force AC-130 gunship aircraft destroyed 3 gunboats moving near the Mayaguez, probably preventing an attempt to relocate the captured crew to the Cambodian mainland. The USS Hulk maneuvered alongside the Mayaguez. U.S. Marines boarded the Mayaguez and found the ship abandoned. U.S. Air Force helicopters then began landing ground troops on Koh Tang. Each landing attempt encountered deadly and accurate ground fire from a large force. 4 helicopters were shot down and 5 more damaged. 14 Americans were killed. Nevertheless, more troops were moved ashore. As the assault continued, the Mayaguez crew suddenly appeared in a small boat and were rescued at sea unharmed. With the crew now in control of the ship, the Mayaguez departed the local area. The assault on Koh Tang Island then immediately turned into a rescue mission. The problem? Removing some 200 U.S. Marines with only 3 available U.S. Air Force helicopters. The enemy met each rescue attempt with heavy and accurate ground fire. Shown here, a rescue helicopter is hit, igniting onboard elimination flares which threatened to destroy the helicopter. The burning flares are successfully jettisoned and the aircraft saved. During the rescue mission, coordinated support by U.S. Air Force attack aircraft, forward air controllers, rescue helicopters, and gunships hammered enemy ground targets. Finally, after 14 hours, the last U.S. aircraft departed Koh Tang Island. The wounded were airlifted to U.S. Air Force hospitals in Thailand. Total U.S. casualties, 18 dead and 50 wounded. Additionally, 23 U.S. Air Force Security Forces personnel died in a helicopter crash due to mechanical failure in Thailand while supporting this mission.
It's May 1980. A very special American airman returns to the Philippines and to old friends.
This is great. I've never had such a welcoming like this. It's so fantastic. I don't think I saw Amelia after we took you to San Fernando, to the hospital.
It seems all too easy in this society nowadays to just sort of neglect one's neighbor or one's fellow man and just sort of ignore him. And that's where a person has to strive to make himself aware of other people's plights and try to use what means you have at your disposal to help other people.
Gosh, fantastic. I knew I had a good investment. Super.
Helping other people, that others may live. It's the motto of the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service, and a way of life for Master Sergeant Wayne Fisk through 5 tours in Southeast Asia and 2 Silver Stars earned during the Son Tay POW rescue mission and the Mayaguez raid.
It's sort of like a saying which we had in Southeast Asia that circulated in rescue circles that for those who fought for it, life has a flavor the protected will never know. And we know the quality of life, we know the flavor of life. And that's what keeps rescue people going. That's what makes them get in and fight and go to the furthest demands of human endurance in order to save somebody, in order to bring them out.
Wayne Fisk's story is no ordinary story. He's no ordinary man. 450 combat rescue missions and 14 saves make a difference.
You know, I can't remember exactly when it was. My father first instilled in me the fact of his philosophy of having to pay your country for living under freedom in America. I do know, though, in 1966, when the Vietnam War was kicking up, that doggone it was time to join up and pay my debt to my country. Living under freedom in America, in my opinion, is one of those things that's got to be perpetuated by each generation. And since I joined in '66, I haven't had any doubts at all of my slot in the military and the type of life that I've chosen. It's, I guess it's sort of like Daniel Webster when he quoted that God grants freedom only to those who love it and are willing to fight for it and defend it. And that's been pretty much my, my philosophy over the years.
You learn a lot in 5 years in Vietnam, but mostly you learn survival, and that's important. Important to the man on the ground, to the downed air crewman, and to the people who have to pull him out. Wayne Fisk is helping pay back his country in the best way he knows how, by passing on what he's learned about survival to those who will follow. And he's adding new pages to the rescue manual in the process.
Wow, did you guys have to be so rough on me out there?
Well, the hard, cold facts of the situation are that you're a liability to the security of our team, even after positive identification has been established. Now, most aircrew members aren't prepared for a bailout, either mentally or physically. And when you get down on the ground, you're, in most cases, disoriented. And so when we try to establish a link-up with you, we want you to know who's the boss. It's us, regardless of who you are. And if we're going to get you out of that situation, get you back home safely, then you're going to do exactly what we say. And that's the only way that we can operate.
Wayne Fisk talks about service to others. It's lives that count, not who you are or where you come from. And this NCO does more than just talk. During his tour in the Philippines, he spent nearly $5,000 of his own money to help the people of the barrios, the island's small, remote mountain villages. He bought them medicines, food, and clothes. And when his own medical skills weren't enough, he paid for the doctors and hospital care needed to save lives.
Throughout the Far East, I've had a lot of superb support in being able to carry out some medical programs and being able to help people who just didn't have medical programs and capabilities at their disposal. I found that in helping people that it's absolutely rewarding. There's such a difference between the combat aspect of rescue and then getting into the peacetime. And the opportunity to help people in a peacetime environment is thoroughly rewarding, and this is what's been a highlight of my career.
In January 1980, Master Sergeant Wayne Lewis Fisk, pararescueman, was selected by the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce as one of the 10 outstanding young men of America. He was the first Air Force non-commissioned officer to be so honored.